to the World War II newspaper channel where we read the Chicago Tribune one day at a time, going through World War II as it happened through the eyes of those who lived it. If you enjoy content like this, please subscribe to this channel and click on the bell icon to get notifications when a new upload is going to premiere. And also, if you want to hear the actual newsmakers, go check out my other channel, the companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. There we have vintage broadcasts, including newscasts, speeches, old movies, and music. And subscribe to that channel and click on the bell icon. Now for the newspaper. News as read from the Chicago Tribune for Thursday, January 9th, 1941. Henry Chopp reporting. The weather today. The sun rose at 7:18 a.m. It set at 4:37 p.m. For Chicago and vicinity, cloudy with light drizzle or snow flurries in forenoon today, becoming fair and much colder by afternoon. Tomorrow, fair and continued cold, moderate west to northwest winds. The low temperature, 30 degrees. The high temperature, 38. Today's headline, FDR budget jolts Congress. Washington, D.C., January 8th. Warning that internal collapse of the nation may result from the administration's stupendous spending program. Representative Alan T. Treadway, Republican, Massachusetts, today proposed in a resolution the creation of a congressional committee of 16 to study the government's financial situation and make recommendations regarding the expenditures and methods of taxation and borrowing. Treadway is ranking minority member of the Ways and Means Committee of the House of Representatives, which is charged under the Constitution with initiating all revenue measures. He said he spoke for the Republicans on the committee and urged a nonpartisan attack of the financial problems of the nation. Senators Robert A. Taft, Republican, Ohio, and Harry Flood Byrd, Democrat, Virginia, in commenting on President Roosevelt's budget message, declared the solvency of the United States government is seriously threatened by the president's request for enormous expenditures and suggestion that debt restrictions be removed. While both senators supported measures to finance the National Defense Program, they charged the president has made no attempt to check waste in non-defense spending. Senator Taft questioned the need of an army of 1,400,000 men unless it is to be sent abroad. And Senator Byrd declared that abolition of a legal debt limit would encourage extravagance. The president still believes in spending government money as if it were water. He thinks that deficits are a blessing in disguise, Taft said. The resolution introduced by Treadway calls for the appointment of 4 members from each of the 4 committees in Congress which deal with spending and revenue. These are the Senate Finance and the Senate Appropriations, the House Ways and Means, and the House Appropriations Committees. Democrats and Republicans would be equally represented. The purpose of the committee, Treadway told the House, would be to bring about coordination between the appropriation and revenue-raising committees of Congress by providing an overall picture of the federal government's financial situation. Its duty would be to make recommendations regarding the curtailment of non-defense expenditures, the proportion of spending which should be on a pay-as-you-go basis, as methods of taxation and borrowing. The present international situation has caused the Congress to take steps to protect our national security from external aggression, but we have done little or nothing to guard it from internal collapse as a result of economic forces arising out of our present and prospective fiscal situation. The president today has asked us to appropriate the stupendous sum of $17.5 billion with an estimated deficit of $9 billion. The mere statement of these startling facts demonstrates the urgent need for Congress now to formulate a definite and specific financial policy. As we enter upon our defense program, we do not find ourselves in the happy position which existed at the time a similar program was undertaken in 1916. Then we had a national debt of only a little more than $1 billion. Our expenditures for all purposes of government were roundly $1 billion annually. Taxes were few, and they were not burdensome. Today, our situation is vastly different. Our national debt, even before our defense program gets underway, stands at the appalling total of $50 billion. Our tax structure has already been tapped to the extent which leaves few substantial sources of revenue remaining, yet it has proved inadequate to meet the present everyday cost of government, leaving out of consideration the extraordinary defense expenditures. Washington, D.C., January 8th. Despite premonitions of the colossal spending contemplated, Congress was startled by the astronomical figures of the budget for the 1942 fiscal year, which President Roosevelt transmitted in writing to both houses today. The president budgeted expenditures aggregating $17.5 billion for the year beginning next July 1st and a $9 billion deficit. It turned out, however, that this record-breaking peacetime budget is exclusive of the cost of the armament to be lent and leased to Great Britain, Greece, China, and other foes of the Axis powers. Estimates of that expense, covering 2 years or more, range from $3 to $10 billion. The budget total also was exclusive of the complete cost of a civilian training program and an expansion of Social Security yet to be formulated. Altogether, the 1942 budget probably will exceed $20 billion, an all-time high for government expenditures even in time of war. The general reaction was signalized by the long whistle with which one member interrupted the enumeration of mounting billions by the clerk reading the message in the House. Many leaders declined comment, explaining that the financial program presented by the president is staggering and will require days of study for comprehension. Senator Tom Connolly, Democrat, Texas, struck the keynote of approval of the budget when he said, "I'm for adequate national defense if it takes our shirt," while Senator Burton K. Wheeler, Democrat, Montana, took the budget as the text of a warning of the cost of fighting another European war. "This is just the beginning," he said, "and I hope the taxpayers will stop and realize and think long enough to realize what is going to happen in this country after the war craze is over." The Appropriations Committee of the House started the machinery of framing the appropriation bills to carry into effect the president's recommended expenditures of $10,811,314,600 for national defense purposes and $674,213,449 for non-defense purposes, totaling $17,485,528,049. The Ways and Means Committee prepared to consider the president's recommendations of increased income taxes in preference to sales taxes and a general revision of the tax structure. The committee, however, will not attempt to fix new tax rates until March 15th income tax payments disclose how much revenue is to be expected from that source. Washington, D.C., January 8th. The nation faces an unprecedented tax burden even without the enactment of any new taxes, according to estimates contained in the annual report of the Secretary of the Treasury sent to Congress today, along with the president's budget message. The president's budget forecast an increase of 23% in government receipts, virtually all taxes, to a total of about $9 billion for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 1942. This is based upon an estimated national income of $86 to $88 billion by that time. This estimate was based entirely upon existing tax laws. However, new taxes are considered a certainty. Total revenues of $8,971,000,000 estimated for the 1942 fiscal year would represent a new record high in the federal government's collection from taxpayers. Some of the tax legislation passed at the last session of Congress will not be fully felt until 1942, when the higher defense taxes and excess profits taxes will produce an estimated $1,900,000,000 of additional revenue. Reductions in exemptions and increased rates on income taxes will be felt for the first time this year in payments on 1940 incomes. The newly enacted excess profits taxes will just begin to yield revenues to the Treasury. Stiff as those excess profits taxes were, 25 to 50% of what the Treasury considers excess profits, it is known that the administration still feels that people are getting rich out of the defense program and probably will try to put more sting into the tax laws. London, January 8th. The London Times, which speaks with authority, will say tomorrow, Mr. Roosevelt's address to Congress, followed by the budget message yesterday, marks another stage in the evolution of American feeling and determination. From neutrality, indeed, though not in thought, the people of the United States have passed through all aid to Great Britain short of war to all possible aid to Britain, irrespective of the consequences. Nothing more clearly marked the increasingly total worldwide character which the war has assumed. No continent is now removed from its scope. The Daily Mail says the fact is that Americans are in the war on our side as a non-belligerent ally. Every increase in our fighting force is additional insurance to Britain. And now for world news. Cairo, Egypt, January 8th. Britain's mechanized desert cavalry rolled guns into place before Tobruk and other troops took up positions today for a siege of that virtually surrounded Italian base. The stage was all but set for the pounding to commence by land, sea, and air. Tobruk's outer defenses have been felt out by armored patrols, and the British declared other units have flanked it from the west. Any attempt by the Italians to make a determined fight of it at Tobruk may result in a major disaster for Premier Mussolini's men, British military authorities asserted. Once the siege begins, they said, Marshal Rodolfo Graziani's forces would never reach Benghazi, the next major base 200 miles to the west. Taking stock of their losses at Bardia, captured Sunday, the British High Command said the casualties among its British and Australian troops numbered less than 600, compared with 30,000 Italians captured, killed, or wounded there. It turned out that General Annibale Electric Whiskers Berganzoli, the Bardia commander, was not among the captives as previously reported. The British said he got away a jump ahead of their forces Sunday night, along with 2 Black Shirt Division commanders. The British, who say 94,000 Italians have been captured, killed, or wounded since their offensive began December 9th, declare they stand a chance of adding another 30,000 at Tobruk. British and Greek figures indicated that Italy has lost perhaps 150,000 men, captured, killed, wounded, and missing in Africa and Greece. Rome, January 8th. The Italian High Command today reported a torpedo plane attacked upon a British destroyer at Sollum, Egypt. The result was not stated. During the day, Italian youths born in 1922 were summoned to register for the regular conscript army service. Athens, January 8th. More than 300 Italian prisoners of war were taken today in restricted local fighting upon the Albanian front, the Greek High Command announced. Much war material of all sorts, including a mortar battery, was declared seized. Earlier, minor gains by Greek patrols in the Klissura sector and the bombing by British planes in Elbasan, the central Albanian base of the Italians, had been reported. In the Elbasan attack, an RAF communique said despite poor visibility, there were hits on several buildings and resultant fires. A government order increased the number of meatless days from 5 to 6, limiting it to Sunday menus. Rome, January 8th. A warship bombardment of Greek coastal positions on the Albanian battlefront was reported by the Italian High Command. Today, the bombardment was declared to have brought visible results. Local actions during which the Greeks suffered heavily were reported. Belgrade, Yugoslavia, January 8th. Yugoslav foreign circles heard reports today that Bulgaria had rejected a request for passage of German troops and was relying on Russia to bolster her resistance. The Bulgarian premier, Bogdan Filov, was said to have declined to negotiate. His stand was linked to reports that Russia frowns on further German military penetration into the Balkans. Belgrade, Yugoslavia, January 8th. Newspapers of Laibach and Marburg today warned the population of Slovenia to enter air raid shelters when it hears airplane engines. The notices specified that the public should take shelter whether or not air raid sirens are sounded. They declared Yugoslav anti-aircraft batteries would fire on any plane violating Yugoslav territory. Military circles in Slovenia and in Belgrade linked the warnings to the recent violations of Yugoslavia by German bombers and troop transport planes flying to northern Italy. Yugoslav army sources have reported that more than 550 German troop transport planes and 100 bombers, some of which violated Yugoslav frontier zones, flew southward from Austria to northern Italy from December 23rd to January 3rd. Italian transport planes have been observed, leading to the supposition that the Italian Air Force is helping to transfer German troops and technicians from South Austria to Italy. Yugoslavia ordered the suspension of 80 passenger trains effective January 14th because of an increasing shortage of lubricating oils, coal, and passenger cars. Most of the train services affected are in northern Yugoslavia. Berlin, January 8th. With America trying to speed up her production of armaments for possible delivery to Great Britain, Germans turned their attention again today to the battle for England. This remains the big problem of the war, Nazis declared. Some observers believe Germany will seek to hasten the decision before the American deliveries become big enough to play a more important role than they play now. In southeastern Europe, the Axis powers seem to have won another diplomatic battle, with the Bulgarians reorganizing their cabinet to meet with greater German and Italian sympathy. A Sofia, Bulgaria dispatch said there was no confirmation of rumors of a cabinet change, but it was believed Premier Bogdan Filov might soon retire. The German press poured out criticism of President Roosevelt for his message to Congress on Monday. It referred to him as an autocrat, a fanatically ambitious imperialist squandering the money of American taxpayers. He was accused of irresponsible aggressiveness, unqualified maliciousness, of faking history, and of dishonesty. London, January 8th. The British tonight claimed a victory in a clash of submarines in enemy waters after a day of comparatively quiet and aerial warfare. The submarine Tuna, an Admiralty communique said, scored a direct hit on a conning tower of a German U-boat in a surface engagement. A later Admiralty communique, however, announced a loss in another action of the submarine Regulus, which had a normal complement of 50 men. No details were given. Before its fight with the U-boat, the Tuna had sunk an enemy-armed tugboat, the Admiralty reported, and in neither operation did it suffer either casualties or damage. On encountering the Tuna, the account continued, the U-boat made off at high speed, firing its aftergun. The Tuna gave chase and opened fire with its 4-inch gun. The U-boat was certainly hit by one shell on the conning tower, but unfortunately this cannot be considered vital damage. The Tuna chased the enemy for nearly an hour and only broke off the engagement when forced to dive by the appearance of enemy escort vessels, which came to the rescue of the damaged U-boat. For the third consecutive night, Nazi raiders were absent from London. Bad weather was considered at least partly responsible. In Cardiff, Wales, relatives lined the sides of a communal grave for men, women, and children killed in last week's heavy German air raid. Some of the dead remained unidentified. It is now permitted to say that Westminster Cathedral, the largest and most important Roman Catholic church in England, and the Westminster City Hall were damaged in recent air raids. Bombs fell on the choir school, playground of the cathedral, but broke only one window. Incendiary bombs damaged the roof. Berlin, January 8th. New attacks by sea and air on British vessels were reported today by German sources to have resulted in the sinking of 2 merchant ships totaling 10,500 tons and a probable destruction of a third, a 500-ton unit of a minesweeping flotilla. The latest success was achieved about 300 miles west of Ireland this morning, informed quarters said, when a single combat plane bombed an 8,000-ton merchantman to pieces. The High Command communique covering yesterday's actions told of another attack. During a thrust against the English coast, one speedboat attacked an enemy convoy strongly protected by destroyers off the Thames mouth, sinking one 2,500-ton merchant ship, it was stated. London, January 8th. The British government has agreed to a personal request from President Roosevelt to allow clothing and foodstuffs for children in occupied France to pass through the British blockade. It was disclosed today. The consent was given with the understanding that the distribution would be under the direct supervision of the American Red Cross. The decision was declared at the Ministry of Economic Warfare to have in no way altered the British policy of blockading unoccupied France. London, January 8th. The Admiralty announced today plans to expand the British Naval Reserve list immediately by accepting an undisclosed number of men for 3 months training to be followed by their transfer to merchant ships for the duration of the war. Shanghai, China, January 9th. Two long-standing complaints against the Japanese were reported settled here today. Japanese naval authorities agreed to release a small American-owned coastal steamship, the Estelle, which had been held in the Yangtze Delta port for nearly 3 months, and Japanese military authorities discontinued interference with news broadcasts by an American-owned radio station. Malvern, England, January 8th. The Very Reverend Walter R. Matthews, Dean of St. Paul's, told the post-war Reconstruction Conference tonight that he believed the British, if and when they win the war, would be compelled to control Europe for a considerable time by force of arms and to enlarge the British Empire, possibly under another name. He said he was convinced there were countries which would be willing to enter the empire if assured defense, that Europe would be unified sooner or later, and that he doubted whether it would be possible to maintain a system of small countries such as existed before the war. Berlin, January 8th. A Japanese military mission headed by General Yamashita of the General Staff arrived in Berlin tonight for conferences concerning the cooperation envisioned by the Three-Power Treaty of Alliance signed here on September 27th. It was stated the commission would hold extended conferences with German military leaders and study matters arising from the treaty, to which Italy is the third party. Yamashita and his colleagues came by way of Siberia. New York, January 8th. Eastern economists said today that if war credits are to be extended to Great Britain on a business basis as loans rather than outright gifts, English rubber holdings would form a sound basis as collateral. Attention was focused on the question by dispatches from Chicago, which carried the suggestion of William B. Benton, vice president of the University of Chicago, who proposed that the United States ask England to ship the priceless collections of British museums to America for collateral if there is any serious intention of asking repayment of war loans. By considering this question, Benton said, Americans could determine whether they meant outright gifts or loans when discussing war credits. On a value basis, crude rubber is the most important commodity imported into the United States, it was stated, and in 1939 these imports totaled $178 million. More than 96% of the world's crude rubber is produced in the Far East, and 98% of American imports comes from this district. Figures for 1 year, when 894,944 long tons of rubber were produced, show that 51.9% of the output came from British possessions. 57% of the rubber imported in 1939 came from British Malaya alone, and British India is another large producer of rubber. More than 500,000 tons of crude rubber is used in the United States yearly, 80% in the manufacture of tires and inner tubes, and the remainder in rubber boots and shoes, hose, and miscellaneous products. Vichy, France, January 8th. The United States government formally tightened its diplomatic relations with the French government of Chief of State Henri Philippe Pétain today when Admiral William D. Leahy presented his credentials to France's patriarchal leader as President Roosevelt's new ambassador to this country. Leahy presented a personal letter from Mr. Roosevelt to the French leader during the ceremonies. Lisbon, Portugal, January 8th. Unfavorable flying weather today forced Harry Hopkins, personal emissary of President Roosevelt, to defer until tomorrow his departure for London. In eastern Canadian port, January 8th, Prince Friedrich George Hohenzollern, 29 years old, fourth son of the former Crown Prince of Germany, tonight was reported to have been one of 250 to 300 interned aliens who sailed from this port to help clean up air raid debris in Britain. An official who talked to him identified him only as a grandson of the former Kaiser and gave a description which fits Prince Friedrich, reported last September interned in a camp near Ottawa. Before the war, the Kaiser's grandson was a social leader in London. Reports from Berlin in November 1939 said he had been interned in Scotland. His internment was confirmed last August. His transfer to Canada was surrounded with secrecy. The official who talked to him here said he scrubbed the decks and cleaned officers' quarters while the labor force waited for the ship to sail. London, January 8th. Meat rations were cut again today to 22 cents for each adult for the coming week. Earlier in the week, the meat rations had been set at 30 cents. The weekly meat ration has been cut successively since mid-December from the equivalent of 47 cents worth a person. Lord Wilton, the food minister who 2 weeks ago asserted the meat shortage is only temporary, said that henceforth meat rations will be adjusted on a weekly basis, varying from 20 to 30 cents per adult. For the first time in 17 months of war, we failed last week to meet the meat ration, Wilton said. He declared diversion of supplies to Libya was partly responsible and asked, "Would you rather have a little less meat for a week or two, or would you rather have Bardia?" Then he added, "We must grow more food at home." Bordeaux, France, January 8th. The first woman to die under the guillotine in France in 52 years was executed today for poisoning her husband and mother. Vichy, France, January 8th. The French government ordered an immediate increase in rations and acceleration of food transport to Paris today to relieve a serious food shortage in the German-occupied capital. Simultaneously, meetings of government officials both here and at Paris resulted in a decision to cut tax and rationing red tape. An authorized source said France's difficulties were due to the British blockade. Butchers will be permitted to send unlimited amounts of meat to Paris, it was announced. An immediate increase was ordered for January rations of bread, sugar, dried vegetables, rice noodles, and preserves in Paris. Allahabad, India, January 8th. Maulana Abdul Kalan Azad, president of the All India Congress Nationalist Party, was sentenced today to 18 months in jail under the Defense of India rules. He was arrested several days ago at the Allahabad station. Hey guys, if you enjoy this channel, check out our companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. Over there, you will hear radio broadcasts of the newsmakers, the news reporters, and various entertainment programs, comedy, drama, horror, all kinds of fun stuff. And you will also get the #1 song every Friday that is represented on that channel as the radio programs correspond with the newspapers that you hear. Each upload premieres the same night the newspaper premieres that you are listening to right now. We even feature movie serials and classic movies on there when YouTube permits it. So swing over to the World War II Old Time Radio channel and click on that bell icon to subscribe. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well and click on that bell icon. I know you'll enjoy them. And now back to national news. New York, January 8th. Disclosure that 960,929 persons, more than one of every 8 living here, have registered as aliens in New York City, not only highlighted the fact that this, in many respects, is a foreign city with heavy proportions of foreign population, but also reminded observers that it has become a refugees' mecca. New York residents familiar with the immigrant tides of years gone by that made this a huge melting pot of conflicting ties and loyalties have found the current influx entirely different. Royalty, brains, and snobbery were joined with the other homeless in the rush here. Giant flying boats carrying a luxury trade supplement shipping services crippled by war. The modern refugee may be a pathetic figure in tatters, perhaps a small child, but just as often he is to be seen entering or leaving a swank Fifth Avenue hotel, riding in a limousine, or teaching a university class. The doctor, the lawyer, and the scientist from a large proportion, and there have been sprinklings of diplomatists and ex-diplomatists, of officials and aides. A number of former Americans repatriated after many years abroad. A few arrived penniless, but a majority were of upper or middle-class families before the chaos came to Europe. Some arrived clad in expensive fur coats with plenty of cash and wearing or carrying jewels, with declared valuations running into the 6 figures. Washington, D.C., January 8th. President Roosevelt today pushed the current rearmament program, which he launched to ensure peace for the United States far beyond the cost of the World War to the nation. In his record-breaking budget message to Congress, he estimated $10,811,000,000 will be spent or contracted for during the fiscal year, which begins next July 1st on national defense. This added to the $17,669,000,000 now being spent and allocated brings the total of contemplated expenditure of the rearmament program to $28,480,000,000. In the 1917, 18, and 19 fiscal years, which embraced the World War, the Army and Navy spent $17,778,000,000. Under that program, an army of more than 1,000,000 men was sent overseas. The 1941 and 1942 fiscal years, as they now stand, would top the spending for the declared war by $10,702,000,000. The estimates presented to Congress made no mention of financing his scheme to loan and lease war materials to Great Britain as the first line of American defense. Congressional sources estimated that the cost of this phase of the administration's concept of American defense may run as high as $10 billion. If these predictions are fulfilled, the cost of the defense program will reach $38 billion, more than double the cost of American participation in the last European conflict. In his budget message, Mr. Roosevelt did not give specific information on what the Army and Navy will get in the way of ships, planes, guns, tanks, and other material for the billions to be spent. Nor did the War or Navy departments supply such data as they have up until the defense expansion program was inaugurated. Washington, D.C., January 8th. A thorough reorganization of the United States fleet and a shakeup in the Navy High Command became effective February 1st, was announced today by President Roosevelt. The fleet is to be divided into Atlantic, Pacific, and Asiatic fleets. The enlisted strength is to be increased from 192,000 to 232,000 men, so that each vessel in all three fleets will have a full wartime strength. In the shakeup of the Navy High Command, Rear Admiral Husband E. Kimmel is to be Commander-in-Chief of the United States Fleet. He also will be Chief of the Pacific Fleet. The appointment gives the Navy one of its youngest commanders-in-chief in modern times. Admiral Kimmel is 58 years old. He succeeds Admiral James O. Richardson, who is 62 years old. Kimmel was aide to Mr. Roosevelt when the latter was Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Admiral Richardson has served the usual year in the post of Commander-in-Chief. He was appointed January 6, 1940. Richardson will report to the Secretary of Navy for duty. It was emphasized that the realignment of the Naval High Command is not to his personal discredit. Kimmel stands number 47 on the list of admirals. He will jump 46 officers who have seniority over him when he takes command. The newly organized Asiatic Fleet will be placed under Rear Admiral Ernest J. King, present commander of the Atlantic Patrol Force. He is 62 years old. The Asiatic Fleet will continue under the command of Admiral Thomas C. Hart. He is 63. New York, January 8th. Grover Leoning, pioneer aircraft producer, said tonight that more than 100,000 armed American troops could be flown overnight nonstop from the United States to Brazil by a fleet of 1,000 of the new giant planes ordered for the Army. Loaning talked to the New York Electrical Society, stressing the risks he foresaw in failure to develop aviation for carrying freight, soldiers, ammunition, and guns. The giant new plane ordered by the Army, the B-19, he said, can carry up to 125 armed troops with complete equipment 3,000 miles nonstop. As a result of tests at Fort Benning, Georgia, and Fort Sam Houston, Texas, it has been shown that a war-strength infantry battalion with a complete arms and ammunition and other supplies can be transported in 50 airplanes of the ordinary standard types, provided that 4 of these are modified to two-door types to accommodate the infantry battalion guns. San Diego, California, January 8th. The Ford Motor Company and Consolidated Aircraft Corporation will cooperate in production of huge bombing planes for national defense. This was made public today by Edsel Ford and Major Reuben H. Fleet, heads of the respective concerns, after an inspection of Consolidated San Diego plant. Ford said he was willing to place all facilities of his River Rouge plant near Detroit, Michigan, into production of the B-24 four-engine bombers now being built by Consolidated. Plans call for the construction by Ford of bomber parts and their assembly by Consolidated at a plant to be erected at Fort Worth, Texas. Immediate expansion of the River Rouge plants and a changeover from auto production to plane parts is contemplated. Washington, D.C., January 8th. Senate non-interventionists today disclosed their purpose to call Joseph P. Kennedy, former ambassador to Great Britain, before the Foreign Relations Committee in an attempt to ascertain the probable results of a war to the finish in Europe and what the war aims of the United States would be in underwriting a British victory at any cost. The non-interventionists declared that an exploration of war objectives and the possibilities of a negotiated peace is imperative now that President Roosevelt has eliminated the phrase "short of war" from his program of full support for Great Britain, Greece, China, and any other countries that may be fighting Germany, Italy, and Japan. Kennedy will be asked to expound the thesis of Ernest Bevin, Labourite member of Winston Churchill's war cabinet, that a British victory will be followed by National Socialism in England. The non-interventionists want to know whether the American people wish to go to war in order to save England for National Socialism. Kennedy, who resigned his ambassadorial post in December, is known to share Bevin's belief. His last public utterance was in a letter to Representative Louis Ludlow, Democrat, Indiana, in which he said the defenses of the United States are inadequate for its own requirements, let alone aiding the British. Washington, D.C., January 8th. Charles Quinn, secretary of the New Jersey Democratic State Committee, testified today that his organization borrowed $100,000 shortly before the November elections to pay for nationwide broadcasts by President Roosevelt and Senator George W. Norris, Independent, Nebraska. Quinn, a witness before the Senate committee investigating campaign expenditures, said the money was obtained from R.J. Reynolds of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Quinn could not identify Reynolds further. Washington, D.C., January 8th. Officials and employees of the Federal Home Loan Bank Board were accused of irregularities in their travel expenditures and of taking vacations at government expense in the annual report of Comptroller General Lindsay C. Warren submitted to Congress today. The report did not reveal names nor the amounts involved, but said that an investigation had been made. Under customary procedure, when irregularities are charged by the General Accounting Office, those responsible are required to reimburse the government for any losses sustained. The Comptroller General said that personnel from the Homeowners Loan Corporation and the Federal Savings and Loan Insurance Association, two corporations under control of the Home Loan Bank Board, were involved. Washington, D.C., January 8th. Wrathful Republicans explained to the House today why they did not applaud President Roosevelt's annual message on Monday. Their failure to applaud had been described by Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt, the president's wife, in her daily column and at a press conference as shocking and terrifying. Representative Noah Mason, Republican Illinois, offered the most pungent reason for the minority's lack of enthusiasm over Mr. Roosevelt's warlike speech. "You don't applaud at funerals," said Mason. Representative John Tabor, Republican New York, told members he did not applaud the address because he didn't trust the president. Washington, D.C., January 8th. The Justice Department announced today the arrest of Juan J. Tamaldali, also known as Count Tamaldali, on charges of mail fraud involving more than $500,000 allegedly obtained from New Jersey's businessmen through representations that he had a process for making heatless light known as bottled sunshine. A statement by the department said Tomadelli also obtained large sums through false representations concerning a group of paintings in his possession which were alleged to be old masters, and that he had used the names of many persons prominent in official life, none of whom, however, were actually connected with Tomadelli or knew anything about his operations. Tomadelli was arrested last night, the department said, at his luxurious suite, which he had occupied for some years. New York, January 8th. District Attorney Thomas E. Dewey today arrested Joseph Sox Lanza, one of the most notorious labor union racketeers in New York and reputed czar of gangland domination of the New York City food industry. Dewey charged Lanza had been able to wield his underworld power even while he was serving 2 years in a federal penitentiary on an antitrust conviction. He also charged that the racketeer had compelled leaders of Local 202 of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, AFL, to pay him $120 a week by threats of murder. New York, January 8th. General Motors Corporation reported today new record sales in all classifications in December and for the calendar year 1940. Total sales to domestic and Canadian dealers plus overseas shipments came to 223,611 units in December, compared with 217,406 in November and 207,637 in the like 1939 month. Including overseas shipments, sales to domestic and Canadian dealers amounted to 2,025,343 in 1940 against 1,542,776 in 1939. Orlando, Florida, January 8th. Orlando's airport is filled with 443 Flivver airplanes tonight, and more than 1,000 sportsman flyers are in this city. The visitation is part of the 1941 Light Plane Cavalcade. 400 more ships are scattered along the Atlantic coast and up the Mississippi and Tennessee valleys and between here and Houston, Texas. All are bound for Miami and the winter air races over the weekend. In the group here are more than 50 small planes from the Chicago area, which includes a 50-mile circle outside the Loop. More than 20 Chicago airports are represented. The Chicagoans range from Bob Scott, 5615 University Avenue, a Chicago University student who is flying his Taylorcraft 50, to Dave Bishop, professional pilot from Harlem Airport, and George D. Porter, 5047 South Parkway, a real estate broker, who are together in a rear-wind Cloudster. Scott ran out of gas near Carter, Tennessee, and landed in a pasture beside a gasoline filling station. He obtained automobile fuel for his ship and continued his trip. Edward Lasco and Albert Spears of Michigan City in a Cub 60 trainer reported a narrow escape from crashing in crossing mountains between Chattanooga and Atlanta. Their motor began missing when they were over the Tennessee River with no possible landing field within gliding range from 4,000 feet. Fortunately, the motor lasted until they got into Atlanta and got the water out of a gas tank. Then the engine functioned. William P. Lear of Dayton, Ohio, manufacturer of airplane navigation equipment, and 3 companions were injured late today when his twin-engine cabin plane ran out of fuel and cracked up in a forced landing in a shallow creek near St. Mary's, Georgia, 22 miles north of Jacksonville. The party left New York this morning. With Lear were John Osborne, New York, Robert L. Moore, Concord, Massachusetts, and Virginia Branton. They were taken to a Jacksonville hospital, which Moore left tonight. Tomorrow, they will continue on to Miami, where the only airspeed event of the last 12 months in the United States will be conducted. These races will be among the light plane pilots and probably will decide the speed championships among the light airplane manufacturers. Omaha, Nebraska, January 8th. The agility of Robert A.G., 10 years old, was credited today with saving him from possible serious injury when he was struck by a car. As he tried to spring out of the way of the machine, the bumper knocked him face down. Turning over quickly, the boy grabbed at the bumper and held on, sliding along on his back until the driver stopped. His only injuries were some scratches on his face and a bump on the head. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this channel, check out our companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. Over there, you will hear radio broadcasts of the newsmakers, the news reporters, and various entertainment programs, comedy, drama, horror, all kinds of fun stuff. And you will also get the #1 song every Friday that is represented on that channel as the radio programs correspond with the newspapers that you hear. Each upload premieres the same night the newspaper premieres that you are listening to right now. We even feature movie serials and classic movies on there when YouTube permits it. So swing over to the World War II Old Time Radio channel and click on that bell icon to subscribe. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well and click on that bell icon. I know you'll enjoy them. And now for local and regional news. 300 Chicago Negro youths who have the required 2 years of college and the physical qualifications for acceptance as flying cadets in the Army are seriously considering enlistment in the Royal Canadian Air Force, according to A.L. Foster, Executive Secretary of the Chicago Urban League. The League is an agency working for the betterment of Chicago's colored population. Several of the youth already have made plans to go to Canada. One who finished third in a flying course conducted last year by the Civilian Aeronautics Bureau at the University of Minnesota has been approached by the British Council here with an offer that he accept full expenses to the nearest Canadian recruiting station, Foster said. Our boys have grown mistrustful of the administration, Foster said. Too many promises made just before election time still remain unfulfilled. Foster referred to President Roosevelt's announcement last October 9th that as part of his expanded defense setup, he would maintain the strength of the Negro personnel of the Army on a proportionate population basis, establish Negro organizations in each major branch of the service, accelerate the training of Negroes as pilots, mechanics, technicians in aviation, and form Negro aviation units. The administration has made nothing but empty gestures just thus far, said Foster. In an attempt to pacify us, it gave us a fine Waco training plane at the Harlem Airport. The Civil Aeronautics Bureau and the Army Air Corps jointly conduct a special flight instruction project for Negroes there. This is the same type of training plane in use at the flying field for white boys. We appreciate having it, but thus far only 20 boys have accepted to use it. The young men accepted for this project undergo many hardships, Foster said. They do not receive the $75 monthly paid to flying cadets at other fields. They are not supplied with uniforms or other flying equipment, and they are deprived of the advantages of medical and dental attention, board, and lodging, he said. All of the boys at the Harlem field wear the same flying suit, he said. Training flights are delayed while one boy takes off an outfit and another one gets into it. The large percentage of Negroes on Chicago's relief rolls was cited as the best argument for accepting more Negro youths at the recruiting offices. The Chicago Relief Administration reported yesterday that 27% of Chicago's Negro population is on relief compared with 3.5% of the white population. The lack of training facilities for Negro draftees was cited by State Draft Director Paul H. Armstrong recently as the reason why only a limited number of Negroes will be called for service in January. London, January 8th. Pilot Officer Philip H. Leckborn, 28 years old, of Salem, Illinois, the first member of the American Eagle Squadron to lose his life in this war, was buried with military honors in a village churchyard near his station in England today. His coffin was draped with an American flag and a Union Jack. The official announcement of his death said he lost his life while flying in active service on Sunday, but his death was declared to have been the result of an accident. No further details were given except that he had about 100 hours of operational flying. Leckborn was one of the first Americans to come to England soon after the war broke and joined the Royal Air Force. He was assigned to the Spitfire Squadron of the Auxiliary Air Force during the fighting last September, distinguished himself by shooting down an enemy plane at sea and returning to his base almost on his last drop of gas. He became one of the original members of the American Eagle Squadron when it was formed on October 8th. Commander Paul A. Stevens, recruiting officer for the 9th Naval District, said last night that expansion of the Navy's enlisted strength from 192,000 to 242,000 men, as announced yesterday in Washington, would not have much effect on recruiting in Chicago, where it already is moving at high speed. We will continue to furnish about 120 men a week from Chicago and 660 a week from the 9th District to the Great Lakes Naval Training Station, he said. We had almost reached the authorized strength of 192,000 men before the expansion was authorized. Now, instead of letting up in our district, we will continue to recruit until the new quota is filled. Before this nation extends further aid to England in the European war, it must be made strong enough to stand alone against any aggressor or combination of aggressors, Brigadier General Thomas S. Hammond, chairman of the Chicago chapter of the America First Committee, declared last night. He spoke during a discussion sponsored by the Chicago Association of Credit Men in the LaSalle Hotel. Attorney Edgar Bernhardt spoke in behalf of the Chicago chapter of the Committee to Defend America by Aiding the Allies. We must build for defense, but for defense at home, General Hammond said. We must make every sacrifice to defend the United States, but we cannot defend America by aiding anybody. The United States now has a frightful shortage of war equipment. We cannot spare anything that will endanger our defense. When we have enough long-range bombers, enough tanks, enough anti-aircraft guns to protect America against any attack, then that is the time to think about aiding England. If we rely on Great Britain for our defense, we will suffer the fate of every nation which has relied on others. He warned that the use of American ships to convoy equipment to England would mean war. If we put our flag in the war, then we put our sons in it too, he said. General Hammond asserted that aid to England should be kept within the limits of the American Neutrality Law and the Johnson Act. We must not take steps which will lead to another American Expeditionary Force, he declared. Beware of the pitfalls of temporary business prosperity and do not worry too much about adversity, which courage can overcome. This advice for the protection of America's financial foundations as the nation proceeds through the critical period caused by the rush to rearm was given yesterday by Albert W. Harris, chairman of the board of the Harris Trust and Savings Bank. Speaking at the annual meeting of the bank's shareholders, Harris described the banking outlook as it related to the defense program. Among the highlights in his comments were, number one, the nation's banking position was never in better position to help finance such a huge undertaking as the national defense. Number two, an increase in bank reserve requirements against deposits as recommended recently by the Federal Reserve Board will further strengthen our banking structure. Number three, banks should act now to build their contingent funds to provide against losses bound to occur at the end of the defense spending. Looking forward to the coming year, Harris said, it is well to be forewarned with the hope that we shall thus be forearmed. Spending borrowed money on a large scale increases business activity and temporary profits, but produces nothing self-liquidating. It disappears into the air, so to speak. What should we be forewarned against? Not adversity or hard times, because I believe we can take that if we have to, and in due time we shall have to, and in the better for it, and be the better for it. We should be forewarned against the temporary business prosperity, against a tendency to let our fighting spirit be undermined, against a disregard for the fundamentals, against false hopes. To put it in a phrase, we should keep our feet on the ground. We are, for all practical purposes, at war since we are spending for war, whether we fight or not. Harris said the steps now being taken to maintain the value of the dollar by pegging its gold content are desirable if the country is to deal largely in dollars borrowed from the public. The public should be protected, if possible, against payment in a less valuable dollar. Commenting on the proposed increase in bank reserve requirements, he said that such action would curtail that extent the lending power of the banks. At first blush, this might seem undesirable with the extensive program which goes with war spending. However, the spending of borrowed money increases bank deposits, he continued, and there was at one time a theory that a bank's invested capital should approximate 10% of its deposits. Low earnings in recent years have not permitted accumulations of capital. By whatever the percentage of deposits, the reserve requirements are increased, the net deposits at risk are reduced. Thus, automatically, the situation is made stronger with very little fuss or feathers. All directors and officers were reelected. Randolph G. Osley was promoted to Assistant Vice President. Lester A. Wood was elected Assistant Cashier. Woodward Burgert was elected Sales Manager, and Thomas G. Barnes was made Assistant Secretary. Thomas Masato, business agent of Lake County Local 152 of the International Hod Carriers Union, yesterday branded untrue reports that his union was threatening a strike on the National Defense Project at the Great Lakes Naval Training Station. There never will be a strike by my union on a defense job while I am business agent, he said. I'd resign first. Moreover, our contract calls for arbitration of any possible dispute. Meanwhile, William Sheave, president of the union, said he had not yet received official word that initiation fees for the new union members had been reduced to $15. The present fee is $25. It originally was $40. The $15 fee was announced in Washington Tuesday by John P. Coyne, head of the Building Trades Council for the American Federation of Labor. Sheave said that 150 veteran union men are waiting for jobs, which made it doubtful that any new men would be accepted soon. M.J. LaCroix, manager of manufacturing for the International Harvester Company, said yesterday that work on defense orders for motor trucks at the company's Springfield, Ohio plant would be curtailed by next Monday should the strike at Fort Wayne, Indiana works continue. Restriction of operations at the Springfield plant, which depends upon the Fort Wayne works for certain truck parts, would tie up work on 310 heavy-duty trucks ordered by the Marine Corps and the Navy, LaCroix said. David T. Rodley, federal labor conciliator, reported at Fort Wayne last night that officials of the strike-bound International Harvester Company Works here and the CIO United Automobile Workers Union have agreed on 7 major points in contract proposals. He said a committee would meet tomorrow on the remaining differences. Reports of huge expansion programs by private companies as a result of the defense activity shared the industrial news front yesterday with the awards of additional contracts by the Army and Navy totaling about $30 million. Chicagoland companies received War Department orders amounting to $618,221. Orders for equipment to cost $17,500,000 were authorized by the Pennsylvania Railroad to keep well ahead of present and anticipated needs of the National Defense Program and the ordinary requirements of business. Included in the program are 4,500 freight cars, 200 cabin cars, 5 electric passenger locomotives, 20 locomotive tenders, 600 bulk freight containers, and the remodeling and air conditioning of 80 additional passenger coaches. All construction work will be done in the Pennsylvania's own shops. Blacklight, born of Europe's war need for illumination during air raids, is on exhibition in its new role as a peacetime home decoration at the International Home Furnishings Market in the Merchandise Mart. Registration of buyers there yesterday for the third day of the market continued its record-breaking pace, reaching 5,388 compared with 5,276 for the same period last year. The count at the National Home Furnishing Show and the American Furniture Mart was 7,500 against 6,850 a year ago. Both had peak attendance in 1940. The new light does not project a beam in a darkened room. Any objects coated with fluorescent paints or dyes become luminous and appear to glow. Dark light is one phase of a new trend of color lighting in home decoration. Also on display is rattan, plastic wrought iron, and hickory furniture designed for a wider variety of uses and adjustable for any size room. Among the novel products is a knee-hole desk with a top that folds out to make a dinette table. Matching the desk is a night table matching the desk is a night table enclosing clothes hamper. Indianapolis, Indiana, January 8th. A recount of all votes cast for governor of Indiana last November 5th was sought today in a petition to contest the election of Henry F. Stricker, Democrat, which was presented to presiding officers of the legislature. The petition is expected to be filed with the legislature on Friday. Revelation of the contest was wholly unexpected, and hotel lobbies filled with politicians and officials here for the opening of the legislative session were alive with speculation about the forthcoming battle. Stricker, the only Democratic state candidate to be declared a winner last November, limited his comment to the remark that he is too busy to think about the contest. His announced margin of victory over Glenn L. Hillis, Republican, was only 3,478 votes, the smallest in the history of the state. Springfield, Illinois, January 8th. The 62nd Illinois General Assembly began its work today on a note of patriotism sounded by Elmer J. Schnackenberg of Chicago immediately after his election as Speaker of the House of Representatives. Never has the nation looked to Illinois in a crisis without Illinois responding, he said after mentioning the serious aspect of the national situation. For national unity, for national defense, Illinois always will be in the vanguard in responding to the call of Americanism. Schnackenberg urged that in all legislative matters in this field, party lines be forgotten. At the same time, he promised that his control of the gavel will be in accord with the rules of fairness, squareness, and justice, not only to the members of the House, but to all groups in the state seeking or opposing legislation. Springfield, Illinois, January 8th. Governor John Stell sang the Democratic swan song today, 4 days in advance of his retirement, in a message to the legislature which stressed the 8-year record of his party in the state house rather than his own 100-day administration. Stell also admitted a record-breaking budget for the coming biennium, which totaled $523,664,374, an increase of $28 million beyond that adopted for the current 2-year period. He is required by the Constitution to present a budget, but the incoming governor, Dwight H. Green, who takes office next Monday, is under no obligations to retain his predecessor's figures. Principal recommendations in the Stell message include removal of the sales tax on food, taxation of natural resources including oil and coal, should additional revenue be needed, and a revision of the parole board setup so that its members will serve staggered terms. By the time the retiring governor was called to address a joint session of the General Assembly, both houses had taken steps to provide $29,650,000 in relief and old age pension deficiencies. Bills to withdraw the immediately needed portions of these monies from the general revenue funds were introduced in the Senate by Earl B. Searcy, Republican Springfield, and in the House by Reed F. Cutler, Republican Lewistown. Both sets of measures were advanced to second reading. The legislative program adopted in the House calls for advancement of the bills to third reading tomorrow in an agreed program session and for final passage there on Monday. An ordinance to charge an inspection fee against dairy farms, milk receiving stations, and plants and revive other milk fees was ordered submitted to the City Council without recommendation by the Finance Committee yesterday. Public hearings on the measure will be held. The proposed ordinance would raise $395,000 in revenue, or approximately the amount the city now spends in making milk inspections without charge to the milk interests. The measure proposes a fee of 1 1/4 cents per 100 pounds, 46.5 quarts, of milk at dairy farms, 1/4 cent per 100 pounds at receiving stations, 1/2 cent per 100 pounds at milk plants, and 5 cents per 100 pounds of cream at milk plants. 175 members of the Steelworkers Organizing Committee affiliated with the Congress of Industrial Organizations went on strike yesterday at the Indiana Harbor plant of the Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company. The men are chippers employed in the billet yard. Company officials refused to comment, but Joseph Germano, head of the Calumet District of the SWOC, said the strike was called because the chippers are underpaid and because the company has refused to submit controversial questions to arbitration. Germano said the chippers are paid 81 cents an hour in comparison with a high of 91 cents paid in other plants in the district and a low of 74 cents. Sheriff Thomas J. O'Brien of Cook County scored a lower percentage than any other Illinois sheriff in serving notices on handbook operators that they are violating state law and must stop operating. This was shown yesterday when he filed his returns with the St. Clair County Circuit Court at Belleville. His office, he reported, has served only 41 notices to 1,380 handbooks listed by the court in its anti-gambling injunction. This gave him a rating of 3%, the lowest of any returns made thus far by Illinois sheriffs. The injunction against handbooks covering the entire state was issued on December 3rd. Tomorrow, publishers of the Bulletin Record and the Winning Horse Chicago Turf Sheets are scheduled to respond to contempt citations in Belleville, the charges being that they ignored the injunction. A warrant charging Joseph W. Shulman, former municipal judge, with larceny by Bailey was obtained before Judge Thomas A. Green in felony court yesterday by Mrs. Catherine Dobritz, 4628 Ohio Street. Mrs. Dobritz charges that last April she gave Shulman, since disbarred as a lawyer, $500 to use in acquiring title to a house in Muskegon, Michigan, of which she was part owner. The plaintiff alleges that Shulman failed to use the money for that purpose and, after many complaints, has returned only $110. Shulman appeared shortly thereafter before Judge Green to ask that the warrant be withdrawn. He admitted owing Mrs. Dobritz money. Judge Green refused to withdraw the warrant, released Shulman on his own personal recognizance, and set a hearing for January 23rd. Edward Mapes, 50 years old, an ex-convict, was found guilty of statutory rape by a jury in the Kane County Circuit Court at Geneva Tuesday night. His punishment was fixed at 15 years in prison. Judge C.D. Page will hear a motion for a new trial Saturday. It was charged that Mapes seduced a girl 14 years old while he was a WPA guard at an Elgin school. The girl was one of the children he escorted across the street daily. More than 5 years ago, on August 9th, 1935, the automobile of Charles Nixon was stolen from the garage in the rear of his home at 4322 Ellis Avenue. Yesterday, detectives Alex Weber and Alex McCabe of the Hyde Park Police noticed a car without license plates, apparently abandoned, standing in front of 5510 Cornell Avenue. Checking through their records, they found the Nixon case was unsolved and called Nixon to inform him he can have his automobile back. 16 firemen were overcome by smoke yesterday while fighting a basement fire which filled the 16-story apartment building at 415 Aldine Avenue with smoke. 100 women and children fled from their apartments. The blaze was believed caused by a short circuit in a washing machine. The damage was estimated at $100. Captain Emery Coffin, 60 years old, acting chief of the 13th Battalion, was overcome twice by smoke, which filled the basement and swept to the upper floors through a service elevator shaft. He was revived a second time by a pulmotor squad. He was taken to Alexian Brothers Hospital. Lieutenant Martin Carney of Squad 10 also was taken to the hospital, while 14 other firemen were treated at the scene. Mayor Kelly last night said that city employees belonging to unions which threaten to strike because of prospective salary cuts may jeopardize their civil service standing and possibly face criminal prosecution if their work stoppage creates fire and health hazards for Chicagoans. The mayor's statement was issued after 1,500 members of the 17 unions involved met in Plumbers Hall, 1341 Washington Boulevard, and adopted a resolution that they would all refuse to work after 8 a.m. today. If this resolution should be put into effect, Chicago would have no lift bridges operated today, and the streets would go unlighted tonight. Members of the Chicago Real Estate Board meeting last night at 32 West Randolph Street voted to postpone until their February meeting action on a slum clearing bill to be presented to the Illinois legislature. The proposed measure, called the Neighborhood Redevelopment Corporation Bill, is sponsored by the Chicago Building Congress. Directors of the Realty Board had unanimously approved the measure 2 weeks ago. It was decided at last night's meeting to have copies of the bill sent to each member of the organization. Radio station WIND announced yesterday it has signed an agreement with the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, ASCAP, for music broadcast rights. The station previously had signed with Broadcast Music Incorporated, BMI. Ralph L. Atlas, president of the station, explained that ASCAP has exclusive agreements with practically all the important music licensing agencies of foreign countries, and that the new agreement was obtained to facilitate broadcasting of foreign language programs. He said, however, that BMI music has been found very satisfactory and will continue to constitute the major portion of WIND's programs. The DuPage County Sportsmen's League last night protested against the killing of 6 elk which had roamed in a section of the DuPage County Forest Preserves off Roosevelt Road, which had been favorites of visitors. Ray Giesler, league president, said the animals were killed to save money. Actually, he asserted, their feed upkeep would not have been more than $20 a year. The league will meet in Naperville next Wednesday night to consider further protests, he said. Theodore Hammerschmidt, a DuPage County supervisor and Forest Preserve commissioner, said there is no mystery to the destruction of the elk. The commissioners ordered their destruction a year ago, he said, and they were killed only after efforts to give them away had failed. The elk were old, Hammerschmidt said, and apart from their feed costs, the county spent $20 a month for an attendant to care for them. The ancient feud between the cat and the bird families has been suspended at Lincoln Park Zoo. 2 young cats who live, eat, and mingle freely with 1,400 birds as yet hasn't touched a feather. Their ancestors back to their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother upheld the family honor before them. The cats, Squeaky, 8 years old, and Fritz, a year old, are the 10th generation of a family of alley cats which has guarded the zoo's bird collection from pests. All day they walk carefully among their feathered friends in the yard outside the birdhouse, and when they feel in a playful mood, retire considerately to a log cabin where they romp with the guinea pigs. As for the birds, well, they completely ignore the cats. Hey guys, if you enjoy this channel, check out our companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. Over there, you will hear radio broadcasts of the newsmakers, the news reporters, and various entertainment programs, comedy, drama, horror, all kinds of fun stuff. And you will also get the #1 song every Friday that is represented on that channel as the radio programs correspond with the newspapers that you hear. Each upload premieres the same night the newspaper premieres that you are listening to right now. We even feature movie serials and classic movies on there when YouTube permits it. So swing over to the World War II Old Time Radio channel and click on that bell icon to subscribe. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well and click on that bell icon. I know you'll enjoy them. And in sports, the Blackhawks, who properly confined their slugging to gents wearing skates, returned home yesterday in fine fettle to take the measure of the Montreal Canadiens in tonight's hockey match in Chicago Stadium. Their continuous ability to trim the world champion New York Rangers as carried on in their rather gory 3-2 victory in New York Tuesday night, combined with the Sunday night tie with the Boston Bruins 1939-40 National League champions, were elements in the high spirits of manager Paul Thompson and his homecoming stalwarts. The winning of 3 points out of a possible 4 on their trip was all the more gratifying because of the play of Sammy Lepresti, who made his major league debut in the Boston match. Lepresti, entirely unfamiliar with big league tricksters in his 2 games to date, has outsmarted the league's scoring leaders Bill Colley and Phil Watson. Though they are carrying stitches from stick wounds received in Tuesday night's brawling at New York, Joe Cooper and Art Wiebe will be ready to go against the Canadiens. Victory tonight over the Canadiens will lift the Hawks into a third-place tie with Boston, which goes to show what little a hot spell will do for a hockey team in hockey systems of ratings. At the end of their slump, which included the defeat of Detroit, gave them here on January 1st, the cellar was yawning for the Hawks, and look at them now. Success over the Canadiens on paper seems a much easier chore than success against Boston and New York. Nevertheless, the Chicagoans remember vividly that when they were in Montreal on their next-to-last road trip, the Canadiens jolted them 7-5. The now ailing Paul Goodman was the Hawk goalie in that game, so tonight, while Lepresti is giving home folks the first look at his puck-stopping talents, the young goalie will have a chance to establish some pertinent comparisons. Lepresti, of course, wants to stay with the Hawks and may do so by sparkling during Goodman's absence. The other game tonight will be between the Red Wings, who haven't lost in 6 starts, and the New York Americans. It is said that the advance sale for Sunday night's anticipated brawl between the Wings and the Hawks is the largest of the season. Neither Giancomo Orlando, the customer knocker-downer, or fiery Jack Adams, manager of the Red Wings, has been given so much as a public slap on the wrist for his riot-inciting behavior here January 1st. They are free to shoot the works in so far as discipline is concerned, barring interference by the police, of course. Chicago's Bruins went into a tie with the Detroit Eagles for third place in the National Basketball League last night by whipping the Eagles 39-30 in the 132nd Armory. The result left victor and vanquished with identical records of 4 games won and 4 lost. The Bruins set such a fast pace in the second quarter that Detroit practically gave up hope. After the third quarter, the Bruins carefully protected their advantage with a slow-moving, semi-stalling attack. Bill Heppick, formerly of Illinois, who topped Western Conference scoring last winter, led both teams with 16 points. Heppick got 3 of his 6 field goals in the third period. 2 were made on pivot plays near the backboard. Detroit led only once in the first half and then for less than 30 seconds. Jim Brown's follow-up shot gave Detroit a 7-6 advantage. Bill Heppick's penalty goal tied the score, and he came back immediately with a long field goal. Wibbs Coutts duplicated it, and Chicago led 11-7 at the end of the quarter. Chicago was red hot in the second quarter. After Ed Sadowski's follow-up had cut the margin to 2 points, Happick made a free throw. Harry Jeanette of Detroit matched that, and the Bruins led 12-10. The Bruins then scored 12 points before the veteran Russ Saunders finally broke Detroit's drought. Mike Novak got 2 pivot goals in this drive. Happick, Hoban, and coach Frank Linsky dropped in long shots. Hogan's 2 free throws completed the assault. In the final minute of the half, Jeanette scored from under the board and Chicago was in front 24-14. The Bruins also outscored Detroit in the third quarter to lead 31-17. Novak Gordon and Stanislav Zakala got Chicago's field goals. Jeanette was the only Detroit man to score from the court. Steve Mamakos finished training yesterday in Trafton's Gymnasium for a 10-round overweight bout with Tony Zale, middleweight champion, in Chicago Stadium tomorrow. The 22-year-old fighter from Washington, D.C. sparred 2 rounds with Bobby Berger in his final drill. Although the spar mate landed constantly with sharp rights to the chin as the tireless Mamakos tore into close quarters, Matt Twomey, Steve's manager, remained jubilant. "There's your new champion," he remarked, pointing to Mamakos after promoter Bill Rand informed him that Zale had agreed to defend his title against Mamakos within 6 weeks if Steve wins tomorrow. One addition was made yesterday to the stack of signed contracts which has accumulated in the White Sox offices during the past weeks. The addition bore the signature of Eddie Smith, the rotund southpaw who, like his mates Julius Solters and Taft Wright, is ticketed for a 3-week weight-shredding siege at Hot Springs, Arkansas, prior to the opening of spring training. 22 of the 34 performers on the Sox roster now are enrolled on the contented list, which includes just about all the important members of James Dyke's baseball cast. 6 of the unreported are rookies. 3 of the better-known pitchers, Clint Brown, Pete Appleton, and Joe Haynes, recently obtained from Washington, haven't made use of the mails. Larry Rosenthal is the lone absentee among the outfielders. 2 extra infielders, Jim Webb and Bill Knickerbocker, late of the Yankees, complete the ranks of the unsigned. The 34 fellows on the roster, unless there should be holdout developments, will take the free ride to the Pasadena training camp. 8 or 10 of these probably can be classed right now as future hopes who, after being given a few helpful pointers, will be returned for additional minor league schooling. Manager Dykes, who came west to attend the Chicago Baseball Writers' Dinner Thursday night, returned to his Upper Darby, Pennsylvania home yesterday. But he won't plan to be there long. He plans to hang his hat in Chicago for a few hours, January 27th, before proceeding to California for another vacation. Jim Wilson, Cub manager, will head toward Philadelphia tonight. He doesn't expect to be back here until shortly before the getaway for camp on February 23rd. Contract progress at the Cub office during the day was confined to receipt of Claude Passal's properly signed papers. Winner of 20 games last season, Passal was rewarded with a boost in wages, hence his prompt action. The ex-Philly works his farm near Lucidale, Mississippi during the winter, but even with all his chores, he reported that he is fat as a pig. He has taken on 2 pounds since the season closed. General Manager James Gallagher announced that the Cubs had terminated a working agreement with the Moline Club after 4 seasons of farm affiliation. A similar hookup probably will be arranged with another 3I League club. According to figures made public by owner P.K. Wrigley of the Cubs, the organization has operated in the red in 6 of the last 10 seasons. The 1940 campaign was the most disastrous of the lot, home attendance declining by 195,000. Ann Arbor, Michigan, January 8th. Johnny G., former Michigan basketball and baseball star, will return to Ann Arbor next week in an effort to work the soreness out of his left arm. The big 6'9" southpaw pitched for Syracuse in the International League after graduation from Michigan in 1937 until the end of the 1939 season when he was purchased by the Pittsburgh Pirates. He developed a sore arm in spring training last season and did not pitch in a single game after the season opened. This is Henry Chopp reporting, and that is news as read from the Chicago Tribune for Thursday, January 9th, 1941. Have an amazing day. God bless.